Hello everyone. Is this a good level for me to talk at with the audio in the background? Although it's quiet right now. And can you still hear the music? Alright, cool. Which one? The microphone or the music? Microphone sounds low? I'll turn down the music a little bit. How about that? Is that better? Is that a better balance between the microphone and the music? Okay, you can't hear the music at all. Wow. Yeah, it's really hard to know what the levels are. Because I'm wearing headphones, so I can hear the music fine. I'm gonna turn off my headphones though. Actually, no, I want to leave them on. So I can still listen to music. But everyone can at least hear the microphone, okay, right? Alright, so I guess we'll begin. So I have my I have the chat is like way over here. So if I look over here a lot, it's because I'm looking at the chat. Alright, so it's like 5:37. We have 14 people here now, so I think that's pretty good, right? Gosh, I wish I could like see this a little bit closer so I'm not like always looking over here. Okay, cool. Making some space. Here you are. Okay. Alright, so if you didn't see the message in the topic on River, the class is gonna like be structured like this, where we have these Twitch streams in the beginning of class. So the Twitch stream will be, I don't know, 45 minutes to an hour and a half, where I'm just talking about new material. And then after we finish the new material, then we'll have, like, at least for this class, we'll have everyone go into Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, and we'll talk about the homework, and I'll give people feedback. You'll be able to work on your own and ask questions and stuff. But for now, we're just going to go through some of the lesson. Okay, cool. Are you all ready to begin? I have my own caffeine here. All right, so let's see. Last time we talked about raycasting, right? And so this time we're going to be talking about, we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about animation and animator controllers. So the first thing I'm going to do is, and don't worry about doing this now, you'll be able to watch the video later to be able to follow through on this, and then I'll be available after the Twitch stream for questions. So let me just switch here. So let me see, now I'm gonna just open up. So the first thing I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna actually go in my browser. So we're not gonna talk too much about like the basics of animation, but if you are doing any kind of 3D modeling and you're making like humanoid people, there's a process called rigging. So some of you may have heard of rigging. Rigging is the process of creating bones, joints, things that make things able to move. And so like you have a body, right? You're a human being, and in your body you have, I guess I should go back to the, you have like an elbow and a wrist a hand, you have all these bones and joints, and everything moves in those joints, right? The joints allow you to move in certain directions, sometimes multiple directions. Like I can move my wrist this way, I can move it this way, and the bones are rigid, so like the bones don't bend at all. And so we're like this combination of joints and bones. And so what rigging will do is it will allow us to create a system of joints and bones in order to move things and animate them. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Mixamo.com. That's Mixamo.com. So Mixamo is, and you'll have to have an Adobe account. You don't have to have a Creative Cloud subscription, but you do have to create an account, and it's a free account. So you can use Mixamo because Adobe owns it. So when you go on there, and this website's kind of like intensive in terms of like running in the background. So you'll see two main tabs up here. You'll see characters and animations. So if you go to characters first, you'll see like a variety of different characters. So these are like humanoid models that have already been created, textured, everything that you could use for your project. And so you can like look through here and find something interesting. Another thing is that if you have a Creative Cloud account or you sign up for one, you can actually get Adobe Fuse, which is, I think it's free because it's in beta, so you don't actually have to have a Creative Cloud account, but if you have to have the downloader or whatever. And so you can get Adobe Fuse for free. And also for students for the spring 2020 semester, for the remainder of the semester, you can get Adobe Creative Cloud for free. So I'm sure that, you know, don't count on that being offered after this semester, but for now, it works. So you can look through here at various characters, and I'm going to pick one to animate as an example. So I'm going to pick this character right here. And so like you have like a little preview window here. You can like look around and check them out. And then you can go to animations, this animations tab. And you can like look at a whole bunch of these prefabricated animations. And so like, I expect that most of these are from motion capture studios. So are you all familiar with motion capture? Or mocap? So if you haven't seen it before, so I guess here are some people being dinosaurs. So you have like these kind of suits. There's like a room with like cameras set up everywhere, and they have these little markers on the body. And what it does is the cameras record the movement of the markers through space to be able to understand like what the motion is for a thing. So you can track stuff and have an animation based on the movement of a person. And so you can translate those relationships between the points moving in space. And so then you can apply it to another model with like another rig. So like you could have like the same animation, this praying animation could be, you know, a different character entirely. So I could have this character do the same pose, even though it was just recorded using motion capture once. And so you can have like more realistic character animations that way. And so it's not too important, but that's where it's coming from. And so back here in the animations, they have like a whole bunch of different ones. Some of them are related to different kinds of games. In the examples, the example previews, like the red ones are supposed to be female animations and the blue ones are supposed to be male animations. So there are like a whole bunch of different ones in here. Here's one like a basketball one. There are some that involve like shooting or rifles. Some that are like zombie things. Dancing. So they have like 52 pages in here. There's a lot to like check out and do. For the thing we're going to do together, I'm going to recommend, so these are individual animations, but there are also ones that are packaged together. So if you go to the search box up here and you type locomotion, which is like movement, then you'll see like a bunch of things that are associated with movement. And so I'm going to select this female locomotion pack. And so like in the bottom left hand corner, you can see that it has 10 next to it. That's the number of animations that come in this pack. I don't even know where this character went. So I'm going to go ahead and I wonder what's in here. Because there's also the basic one. I'm just going to get this regular one. And then I'm going to go to download in the top right. And now the only option I'm going to change here is under format. I'm going to change it from FBX to FBX for Unity. So this will allow you to bring it into Unity very easily with the materials and everything. And then I'm going to hit download. Are there any questions from anyone about what I just went through, about either, you know, the process of like what these animations are, or how to use this website, or anything like that? Y'all want to meet my cat? I showed you my cat? Yeah, you can use these in your projects for this class. So you'll have to use it for the homework. All right, look up. This is my cat Ariel. Very sleepy. Not bothering her now. Okay, so once you download the locomotion pack, you'll have to extract it. And so it's like a zip file. And so you can extract it into your project folder. So I've actually already done that on my computer, so I'm not going to go through that. But again, it's just a zip file, has a bunch of files in it. So I've gone into my assets folder. I created a new folder called models. And in there, I created a new subfolder for my character that I downloaded. And so you'll probably have something that looks like this. You'll have, looking in your project view, you'll have a model, the model itself, and then you'll have a bunch of like empty looking files, and they have descriptions of animations on them. You'll see one called idle, one called jump, all these different things that are associated with locomotion, at least in this example. And so we have to, in order to prepare this, we have to do a few things to some of these files to be able to import them correctly. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to the actual one that has the preview of the model. So you can tell it has actually the name of the model that I downloaded. So I'm going to go ahead and select that one. And then over here in, sorry, I have like too much stuff open. I'm trying to have preview open as well. So you have in your inspector, once you select the model, you have things like model, rig, animation, materials. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to rig. And then you're going to go to under where it says animation type, which is the first option. By default, it says generic. If you expand that down, you're going to choose humanoid. And then once you've done that, you're going to hit apply. So humanoid as in like 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, a basic human structure, and like with some, you know, like we all have like forearms, we all have elbows, we all have knees, stuff like that. And so once you've done that, nothing will have changed apparently. And so the next thing we have to do is we have all these animation things. We need to select all of the animations that came with the zip file. So I'm going to select the first one. I'm going to hold down Shift and select the last one. So all of them are selected. And then I'm going to go under rig. I'm going to change these to also be humanoid. So I'm changing them from generic to humanoid. And then under avatar definition, and it says it can't do this in multi-editing mode. I think it can, but under avatar definition, the default option is create from this model. So create from this model means that the model that's included in the file. However, with these files, there are actually no models. They're just animations. So it won't work if we leave it like this. So you have to change it to copy from other avatar. And then under source, you're gonna hit the circle with the dot. And then you're gonna actually select the model. So that's the one with the actual proper name. And then you're gonna hit apply. And so we can go ahead and check all of these different animations to make sure that they are able to do this correctly. Were people able to follow that, what we did? And if you ever have any questions, feel free to jump in the chat and let me know, because I'm looking over there every 15, 20 seconds or so. All right, so now that we have all of these set up, I'm gonna go back to my character model. And so there's like a little preview here, you can kind of see it. And what's wrong with it? It doesn't look the same as it looked in the preview on Mixamo. Why is that? Yeah, so it's, you can see the color, the material looks gray. Yeah, no texture. So it just looks like the model itself. And so if you go under the tab here that says materials, and so you have the option to extract materials and extract textures. So we're gonna do both of these options. So I'm gonna hit extract textures. It's gonna ask what folder would you like to extract these to. So I'm just selecting the same subfolder. And then there's like a pop-up saying material is using the texture as a normal map. You want to correct the import. You're gonna say fix now. And so now in the project view, you can see that there are like a number of different like textures in here. So this one is just like a diffuse texture, and this one is a normal map. And sometimes, depending on which model you're using, there can be other ones as well. But now when you go back to your model, you should see that it looks good now, right? So you can see all the materials are on there, no problem. And so I'm gonna go ahead and, because this is the scene from last week, I'm gonna go ahead and create a new scene. And I'm gonna bring my character in here. And I'm gonna bring my camera a bit closer and rotate it around. Maybe this isn't like the best. Try to make it a little bit more of a dynamic angle, maybe. Maybe I'll rotate it a little bit. What do y'all think? I think the light, maybe everything's in shadow, which is like a little bit too much. So I'm gonna go ahead and rotate the directional light a little bit. Try to create something a little bit more interesting. I think that's better. And so if you're not familiar with modeling, this is what's called T-pose. T-pose is T. So the person is standing with their arms out and their legs just naturally spaced apart. And so this is like usually associated as like a non animation or default pose. So you know that it's just like nothing. So if I hit play right now, nothing happens, right? So you can see that the character stays in T-pose, not very exciting, nothing's happening. So what we want to do is we want to take all the animations and make them make the model run through the animation. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to, in my subfolder for my model, I'm going to right click on empty space in the project view. I'm going to go to create, and then I'm going to go to animator controller. And I'm going to call this one Akai, which is the name of this character. And so now we have this new file that is an animator controller. And so I want to also apply it to my character. So if I select my model in my hierarchy, I can actually see that under the animator component, the controller option here is empty. So I'm going to go ahead and assign that. And so now the animator controller I created is assigned for the controller of this. It's still not going to do anything. We still have to set it up. So now I'm going to open up this animator controller, and it'll open up the animator window. So I'm just going to make this like a little bit bigger if I can help it. And so like you use the middle mouse button, press down to like pan. In here you use the mouse wheel to zoom in or out. And so you'll see like what looks like a sort of a mapping with this grid. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to right click on empty space here. We're going to go to create state, and we're going to say empty. Now, what happened when I did that? I created a new state, and then what happened? By the way, I'm counting on all of you. Just if this is like too awkward for me asking questions because there's that delay, let me know. I just want to know that you're paying attention, basically. Any kind of commentary you want to offer in the chat is good. So make sure people are engaged. So it's like a flow chart. Cool. It's linked to the green tile. So green tile says entry. So it's going to start off here, right? Entry. And then it goes directly into the state we just created. And so when you select that new state, you can see in the inspector, there's like a name. So if we look through our animations here, which one do you think would be a good one to start with? I don't know if you all can see this. It might be kind of small on your screen. So we have like idle, jump, left strafe walk, left turn, right strafe walk, right turn, running and walking. So idle, right? Idle is the classic default state. So yep, cool. So then instead of new state, so maybe if it's like maybe if it's a walking simulator or an infinite runner, maybe walking would be good. In this case, we're just going to use idle. Sonic foot tap, that's a good one. Classic idle state. So I'm going to call this one idle. So now it has idle in the title, idle in the title. And so for the motion, if you hit the circle with the dot, you'll see a list of all of your animations. Now by default, if you're using Mixamo, the default animation name is mixamo.com, which is like not super helpful. However, if you click on each one, at the bottom here, you can actually see the file name. And so if we look through here, we can actually go through and scroll through until we find idle. I'm going to select that idle one. And so now I'm going to hit play. And you can see that my character is actually entering that idle state. So you can see that everything was moving, right, in this idle state, this sort of like, you know, whatever, like breathing motion. But now, is there movement now? What do you think? That's still? So there's no movement. So like what we can do is if we select our character in the hierarchy, we go back to the animator, we can actually see that the status of an animation. So we have this state called idle, and you can see there's a meter in here. And so this meter And if I restart it, we can see it again. John, yes, it's because the animation ended. So like we can see this cycling through, and you can see everything still moving until it gets to the end. And so we need to change something in the way that the animation is set up. So in different animations are different, but for this idle one, I'm gonna go ahead and select the idle animation in my project view. I'm gonna go to the animation tab here. And if you scroll down, you'll see a bunch of options to like sort of tweak things with the animation. One of them is called loop time. And once you click that, there's a second option here called loop pose. So I'm gonna check both of those boxes. And so once you do that, you have to scroll down to the bottom and hit apply. Don't forget to apply it. So once again, I selected my animation, so I'll do it again with a different one. How about walking? Walking is another one where I'd want it to loop. So I select that walking in the inspector. I make sure that the animation tab here is selected. You can scroll down. There's an option called loop time. Check that box, and then you can go ahead and do loop pose as well. Scroll down, hit apply. So now that animation, it will know that it's something that's intended to be looped. So once it ends one time, it goes back over again. Not all things would necessarily loop. Like for instance, like a jump would not be something that you loop probably. So like you probably wouldn't want to jump just to be on loop, like jump, 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 right? It's usually associated with like, a key press one time rather than something you hold down. So now if we play it again, you can see it's going through the meter, and then when it gets to the end, it starts over again. So we have just like this basic animation setup. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna create a second animation. So I'm gonna go ahead and right click on empty space here. I'm gonna go to create state and select empty again. And so I think I'll probably use walking now. So I'm gonna give this state a name. I'll probably call it walking or walk maybe. And then I want to go to the motion to select, hit the circle with the dot. You can go in there and locate the one using this bottom listing of the file name to find the one associated with walking. And so, it's really hot with these headphones. I think I'm just gonna take them off. All right, so you have walking setup. So you notice how from entry to idle, it started automatically, and you could see that it follows this arrow. So if we want idle to turn into walk, we have to then create a path from idle to walk. So if you want to do that, you select the thing that you want to start the animation at, you right click, make transition, and then select the thing that you want it to go to. So if we want to transition from an idle animation to a walk animation, then I right click, idle, make transition, and then select the one that I want it to go to, which is walk. And then it creates this line with an arrow so you can see the direction that it's pointing. And so now we have from idle to walk. And if we want to be able to go from walk to idle, then we want to create it back the other way as well. So I'll right click on walk, make transition, and then select idle. So if we have this, we can also not only select the states themselves, but we can select the transitions. So if I select this transition, it pulls this up. And so you have some options in here in the inspector. The important one for right now is has exit time. So has exit time is basically a question of whether an animation state can be interrupted. So for instance, if you want the idle animation to finish playing before you transition into the walk, then you would want it to be on. If you want it to be something where you could interrupt the idle in the middle of the animation and immediately walk, then you would turn it off. So I want to turn it off because I don't want to wait the like 5 seconds for the idle animation to complete before we transition into walk. Because if you're a player and you press, a button or a key, you want it to be instantaneous, right? At least for a transition, like if you're like standing there and you want your character to start moving, you want them to move immediately once you press the button. Does that make sense? Cool. So what about from walk to idle? Do you think that we want it to stop walking, or do we want it to finish like the 5-second animation walking if we were to stop pressing something, for instance? Is walking something that has to play out all the way, or is it something that you can interrupt? Immediately, right? So we want to select the transition here again, and we want to turn has exit time off. Okay, so another thing is that, yes, cool. We want to set up a rule for when it switches from idle to walk, right? But typically if you're playing a game, it's probably like you press a key, or you press like, you move the analog stick in a direction and you expect the walk to begin, and that's the trigger. So right now, by default, we don't have any triggers setting it up. So I'm going to select the transition from idle to walk. And if you go under conditions in the inspector, the list is empty. I'm going to go ahead and add one. So if you hit plus, well, it says a parameter does not exist. So we have to go and create a parameter. The parameter is basically a variable for your animator. So if we go over here back to the animator window under parameters, there's like a plus here to add a new parameter. So it's basically a variable that you're using to track the state of an animation or an animator. So I'm going to hit the plus. In this case, I'm going to add, you have different options here: float, int, bool, trigger. I'm going to add an integer. I'm going to call this one, I'll call it move state. And so you can actually assign a value in here, in this little box next to it. And sometimes people create like a whole bunch of different parameters to use because there are different kinds of rules when you would want something to be able to transition into a certain animation. In this case, I'm just going to stick with one to keep it simple. So going back here, now under my conditions, I can select which parameter I want to base this transition on. So I'm going to select move state. And now you have a Boolean, I forgot the term for it, Boolean like comparison thing. You have like greater than, less than, equals, or not equals to. So in this case, we can associate the default state of move state to be 0 because when we created the parameter, it was 0. And so in this case, I could say move state equals 1, for instance. So if we make this parameter, if we give it a value of 1, then it will transition from idle into walk. And then if we look on the transition from walk to idle, we can add a condition here as well. And so I can say move state is equal to 0. So if we make it back to, if we set it back to 0, then it will stop walking and it'll transition into the idle state. So right now, if I just hit the plus, sorry, not the plus, the play. I'm a new streamer, y'all. You can see that it's running through the idle. It's going to keep playing because we haven't changed this parameter value. So if I set this parameter value to 1, you can see that like our character started walking off into the distance, right? And so if I set this back to 0, you can see how it transitioned back. And so like it'll actually show you how it goes from one to the other, and so it'll see the current state. And so like you can think about like this animator control here under parameters, this is just like a debug menu in a way. Like this is just to show you what the value is, and you can modify it manually. But if you're actually in game, this wouldn't work. So what do you think? How do you think we're going to be able to control this parameter to respond to keyboard input? Yeah, so we're going to go and create a script. So if I go under scripts in my assets, I'm going to go ahead and right click. I'm going to go to create C# script. And I'm going to call this one, I'm going to call it Akai move, because I'm just associating with this character now. So I'm going to double click on it to open it up, and it will open it up in my code editor. In this case, for me, I use Sublime Text. So, any questions about what we just did? Because I just talked about a lot as far as like I talked about parameters, I talked about the different animator states. We talked about transitions between them. We talked about the exit time, and we also talked about looping the animation, loop time and loop pose. So were people able to understand what we went through each step? So for right now, we're just worrying about, oops, sorry. We're just worrying about the parameters, so don't worry about the layers. Just go to parameters on the top. So by default, yours might have had layers up selected, and then we move to parameters, and then from there, that's where you can create the parameter. Does that make sense? I already forgot your name. Lane, no? Is that Angelo? I can't remember. No, that's Amortium. Damn it, Antonio. Okay. But did that make sense? I got it now, Sorry. Mark. For the animations. Make the base layer. Are you talking about like the entry in the any state? Is that what you mean, Antonio? Yeah, so this just is created by default. So anytime you create a new animator controller, it comes with any state and entry, so you don't have to worry about that. So when I created a new state, it just automatically, when I created the first state, it automatically created one that was linked to entry. So I didn't have to do anything. I was just explaining what was happening. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. So now I'm going to go back to Sublime Text, and so the first thing we're going to do in our script is we're going to create an animator. So an animator is a class in Unity, so the animator controller, the class name is just animator. So if I want to create a new animator, I'm just going to use the class name, right? So I'm going to write animator, and then I can give it a name. So in this case, I'm going to give it my anim. My anim stands for my animator. And so what I'm going to do with this script is I'm going to attach it to my character. So I'm just going to go ahead and quickly save it. Control S or Command S on a Mac. And I'm going to drag my script that I created, and I'm going to drag it onto the character here. So now we can see that the animator is attached to the same game object as the script we're creating. So when I want to assign the animator to look for a component that's attached to the same game object, how do I do that? I do it inside of start, but what do I do? Please tell me. Get component, right? So I'm going to use the name of my animator inside of start. My anim equals get component, and then I do less than, greater than, open and close parentheses. And inside of the less than, greater than, I put the name of the component that I want to use. So in this case, it's animator. So that will assign my anim to be the animator component. And so now whatever this script is attached to, it's going to find the animator attached to the same game object. And so it knows which one we're talking about. And so what we want to do is we want to be able to change this move state parameter to be responsive to player input. So I can't remember who it was. Someone in the chat earlier said that we could use the input class for that. So if I want to check if a certain key is being pressed, I can check if, and then inside the parentheses for my condition, I can say input dot get key in this case. So I'm going to use get key because I'm transitioning from idle to walk. So I want to be able to make sure that it's this state whenever I do this. So inside of the parentheses, I can use key code, for instance. So I can use key code dot, and what key would be, like, we're talking about transitioning from an idle state to a walk forward state. So what might be a good key that would be intuitive for players? W, right? That's a good one. So maybe arrows as well. I like W. So, you know, just think about it and use whichever one makes sense to you. And so now I have my open and closing curly brackets, and inside of here, I have what I want to happen whenever I'm pressing the W key down. So if I access my animator, which is called my anim, there's a method called set integer. So integer is the type of parameter. So you also have like set bool, set float, stuff like that. And inside the parentheses, it takes 2 arguments. So the first argument is the name of the integer that you want to set, the name of the parameter. So in this case, our parameter is called move state. And so the name of it is a string. And so in quotation marks, because strings go in quotation marks, I'm going to put the name of the parameter that I want to modify. So I'll put move state. And then the second argument or parameter is the value I'm going to give it. So if we want to turn this to on, so remember we had 0 being associated with the idle state, and what do we have the walk state being associated with? So it would transition from idle to walk whenever move state was value of 1, yes. So now I'm going to go back here, and so I'm just going to set this to 1 and then semicolon. So now we created an animator object. We called it myAnim. Inside of start, we assigned it to be using get component. So we said equals get component, the name of the component that we wanted to assign it, which is animator, also called an animator controller. And then inside of update, we checked if, using the input class, the get key method, get keycode.w, meaning the W key is being pressed. If so, we're going to access myAnim. We're going to use the method called setInteger, which will set the value for a parameter, an animator parameter. The first argument is the name of the parameter in quotation marks because it's a string. So in this case, it's move state. And then the second parameter is the value you want to give it. So in this case, we associate it with 1. So I'm going to save this, Control S or Command S on a Mac. And now when I hit play, And so we had this set to 0 by its own, right? So when I press the W key, you can see my character actually starts walking forward and then goes on basically forever because we never actually set it to stop. Okay, so now we want to be able to create a way for our character to stop moving. And so one way to do this is to think about like update runs once every frame, right? And so if we want there to be a default state that everything returns to if nothing is being pressed, one way would be in our update loop is basically, unless we say otherwise, we can set the value to be 0. So we can set it to 0, and then only if we're doing something else do we set it to something else. So I could just have my nm.setInteger move state 0. So when the update loop begins, it will set it to 0, and then only if I'm pressing the W key down will it set it to 1. So when I stop pressing the W key down, it will actually return to 0. So it will always automatically return to that default state. So we could have like a whole bunch of different animations triggered, and no matter what, it would always return to 0. Does that make sense? Because it's kind of confusing, right? 0 is the default state, so if we're not doing anything, it's 0, and if we're pressing the W key, it becomes 1. So I'm saving it again. Control S or Command S on a Mac. Now let's see if we can actually get it to play. So I'm gonna press, so I tapped W, right? So when I tap W, played the animation, you can still see it here. You can see that it transitions into it and then goes back. So I'm holding it down, keeps going. I stop it, stops. And also if you're inside of the scene view, you can hold down Shift and press F. Oops. So if you hold down Shift and press F in the scene view, it will actually follow your character or your object, whatever game object you have. It's a little tip there. You can see our character moving. Now we have like, you know, a basic setup here. So we're gonna go ahead and do one more animation here. So I'm gonna go to my animator and I'm gonna go ahead and create another state. So if I go to create state, empty, I'll call this, I'm gonna use jump. Here we go. And then for the motion, you hit the circle with the dot. I'm gonna find this in the list. And so I'm looking at the bottom at the file name. And so I've assigned the jump motion to it. And so do we want to transition from idle to jump or walk to jump or both? Do we want to be able to do one or the other or both? What makes sense? So John thinks both. Wilmer also thinks both. Ibby, okay, everyone thinks both. Right? That's what it sounds like. Okay, so from my idle, I'm gonna right click, make transition, and then select jump. And then from jump, I'm gonna right click, make transition to idle. I'm also gonna do the same thing from walk. So I'm gonna right click on walk, make transition, jump. And then from jump, right click, make transition to walk. So now we have this kind of like really annoying sometimes. Okay, so by default, these transitions have an exit time. So do we want idle to play out its animation before it plays the jump? Do we want to like watch the full 5-second idle animation? Or do we want it to interrupt idle to go into a jump? So interrupt, right? So you have to go to the transition from idle to jump, and deselect has exit time. And then what about from walk to jump? Do we want to play out the full like 5-second jump animation? I guess it's only 2 seconds. Sorry, walk animation. Or do we want to interrupt the walk to immediately jump? Also interrupt, right? So I'm going to turn that off. What about when we go from jump to idle? Do we want to interrupt the jump mid-jump? Or do we want the jump to play out in full before transitioning back to idle? Yeah, so we want to play the full jump animation. We don't want to like go into like try to walk mid-air or something. So we're going to leave that on because we want the full jump to play out. Thank you. Okay, so now I want there to be a condition for when idle goes to jump. So I'm going to select the transition from idle to jump. I'm going to hit the plus under conditions, and I'm going to say move state. In this case, I'm going to say, and this is kind of arbitrary, I'm going to say equals -1. So I know that if it becomes -1, then it goes from idle to jump. And then what about the transition from jump to idle? What would the move state be equal to? The question again is, what do we want move state to be to transition from jump back to idle? So idle is the original state. So what value do we associate with a move state in idle? 0, right? So we want, if it's equal to 0, go from jump back to idle after you finish the full animation. So 1 was associated with walk, right? So we want the transition from jump to walk. And I'm adding a condition here, if move state is equal to 1. So since we have both, we're having to create the transitions from both. Anytime you want to transition from one animation to another, you have to have the state and the transitions between them. Cool. So now if we want to go back to our script, I'm going to create sorry, Ariel, you're gonna have to get over there. So I'm gonna have another if statement here, so I can check if input.getKey. So do I want to check if for a jump state, let's say that we're using like maybe spacebar, we want to use getKey, or we're checking if it's being pressed down, so you could like hold it down and rapid fire jump, or do you want it to be where you press it down and it does it just the one time? So I agree with John, so I think that just doing it once makes more sense for a jump. So we use getKey down, and then inside the parentheses we'll use keycode dot space. And so here I want to set my anim.setInteger move state, oops, and then the value we associated with this, which was -1. So we're associating -1 with the jump animation. So if you press the space bar, we'll transition into the jump. So let's see if it worked. Think it's gonna work? It works. Sometimes I mess up though. Okay, so I'm in my game, I press space and then it does the jump, right? And And so we have like pretty much what we expect, right? So like if I hold down space, it does not rapid fire jump, it just jumps the one time. When I press the W key down, the character just goes into that walk state, and when I press nothing, just the idle state, just the default. So that's kind of like the essence of what we're doing here with the animator controller. The one other thing that I would mention is that when you select your character, you have the option to apply root motion. So by default, this option is selected, which means if we turn it off, you can see what it does. So if I turn that option off, and now I press W, you can see that the walking animation is still happening, but it's not incorporating the spatial difference. So like before, when I press walk, the character was actually moving in space because the animation accounts for that movement. If you turn it off, it basically turns into like a treadmill, so just like moving in place. So if you want to manually control the movement of the character, then you would turn that off and you would just have it in script. Usually that's what you want to do, but if it's just something really simple, then you can use it on, and it's just like easy functionality. So that's it for what we're going to talk about with animator controllers. So does anyone have any questions for like what we've done so far? And you can say no if you have no questions. Yeah, so that's like a good thing, right? You can always like go back and rewatch the video. So like as soon as like we realize that no one has any questions right now, then I'm gonna stop the streaming, and then you can try it on your own, and then I'll be in Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, and we can I can answer questions and stuff like that. So Ivy asked, how would you do running, because it normally happens when the person double tap the key? So with running, it might be like you hold down, you press W and you hold down shift or something. It depends on the game, right? But like, you know, we could just as easily have it where instead of walk, we had a run animation, and it could work the same way. So, but it would just be another state, so we could just add another state. Does that make sense? In Wilmer, if we have, so we had some animations here by default, which were like walking left or right and turning. So we could, if we wanted to like have those be animations, we could just have them as more animation states. Yeah, so we would just create more animation states. We could associate them with like A and D if we wanted to do it. It's a little weird, but like we could do it. So so like you could get a basic animation thing down. Any more questions? No problem. Okay, cool. So I'm sure like once you try it, you will have questions, and that's okay. So I'm gonna be in about like 15 minutes after I stop the stream. I'm gonna go into Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, and everyone who's here should go in there, and like you could just have it in the background while you're working. So like I'll be available to answer any questions you have. Also, we're gonna talk about the homework probably to answer any questions you had about that. Does that sound good to everyone? All right, cool. Well, I'm gonna be there. So if you're watching this later, yeah, it should be available like right after. So, yeah. Thanks for watching. I hope you're able to follow through. If not now, then later on when you watch it. So I will see you later.